capital outlay levy will drop approximately 7 cents to $2.84, while the special education levy is increasing 20 cents. The impact of the FY18 budget on the homeowner's property tax rate is a drop in the projected levy from $8.44 to $8.14 for $1,000 of assessed valuation. The average school property tax increase over the last 17 years for a typical house in the Sioux Falls School District is approximately 0.8% per year. That's all of my prepared remarks. I'll give you the recommendation after discussion, if you like.
I guess having been on the budget committee and, been involved in this for nearly 9 or 10 years, I give you my view of this year's budget and what I think the board needs to be mindful of. But as I look at the budget this year, we had a 5-year plan last year, as we always do, and came into this year looking at the budget, and we were what came out of Peer, where we had in our 5-year plan a 3% increase. We ended up with a 0.3% increase. So that left us a $3.5 million hole in our budget, essentially right off the bat. And then if you look at the fact that I've got a textbook adoption, which is probably $1.5 million over what normalized would be, what I call normalized, that's why we're spending $5.5 million into the fund balance. The good news is, at least for 1 year, is since, in the last year or two, we've been very good stewards of our money, the district has. We came into, we'll end our fund balance this fiscal year, at about $3.7 million better than we thought we would in the last 5-year plan. So that's good news. That's offsetting it. However, that's a 1-year item. So as I look through it, I look the $5.1 million that we're going to spend into the fund balance, and if I normalize that for the textbook edition, in other words, next year I wouldn't have that. However, I have to bring back in the $2.5 million worth of busing that I've been moving off to the capital outlay fund in the last few years. I'm left what I call about a $6 million structural deficit. That I have to figure out going forward when I look at the 5-year plan, is how do I get back to break even, which I think is something we as a board always want to strive to do, is because we have future boards that have to live with the decisions that we make. And if you look out in a 5-year plan, the way I do that eventually is through what I call efficiencies. So if you think about next year, I've got to come up with $1.3 million in efficiencies, and then what we call the teacher delta, which is essentially younger teachers coming in and replacing teachers that are retiring. That's another $1.4 million. So next year, I've got to drive about $2.7 million in efficiencies, and then the year after that, another $2.5 million. So you can see basically by finding those types of things, I can, in a couple years, I can get $5 million and get back to close to break even. But it's all coming more or less on the expense side by continuing to look for efficiencies. However, when, between busing and salaries, 90% of your budget is, are those things, it's hard to keep finding that $1 million out of your other type of line, expenditure lines. The biggest risk I see to the 5-year plan is more on the revenue side, because the federal funding, we talked about Head Start earlier. It's very unpredictable. Looking at the new administration, it's hard for me to believe we're going to see an increase in federal funding. That's just my gut sense. I don't know how long it'll take, but I think that is going to come under pressure. It's just what my gut tells me. We look at the state funding. I've got a 3% increase, baked into my 5-year plan. I don't know if we'll see 3% again or not. I mean, it's just hard to say. We've gone, other than the bump that we saw to try to move teacher pay from the extra sales tax that was put in, we just don't see that kind of revenue coming out of Pier anymore. It's sort of what's left over at the end of the day, at the end of the session, and sales tax isn't looking very well, and the growth in the economy. So I wonder how good, how solid the 3% is. And if I have another year like I did this last year, and I have another $3.5 million hole, it starts to really put my pressure on the 5-year plan, which is already aggressive. And then we've saw the benefit the last couple of years of an increase in state franchise tax, but that's another one that can jump all over the place. So I see revenue as very, it's going to be tough going, I think, in the next 5 years to keep it at the level that we want to. And I look and I say, well, are we good stewards of our money? And so I do go out and look at how we rank compared to the other districts in the state, and I know that we are good stewards of our money. Out of 150 school districts, we rank 118, which means we're in the lower third on spending, which is a good place to be. And then you look at our demographics and things, and I think when you equalize all that, I think we're very good stewards of our money. If you look at class sizes, staff to student ratios, that type of stuff, we're on the better end of that, as being good stewards of our money and looking for efficiencies. I look at things in the district that, behavioral programs that we're having to deal with in our district. I'm up to 133 FTE or full-time equivalents just dealing with behavioral issues across the district. My ELL population, probably $2.5 million roughly there that I can't cover either through state funding, the extra state funding that we get, or the federal funding. So the 5-year plan is very aggressive, and I would say then we have only one lever in the district to be able to have a contingency for us out there to cover things, like another poor funding year out of Pier. And if I want to keep my teachers to where they're at, and if I want to fund and reward them for their education attainment and those types of things that we are used to doing, the only lever I have at my disposal as a district anymore that I can control is the opt-out. And so I look at when Business Manager Veek said that our levy is going from, this is forecasted in the next budget year to go from $8.44 to $8.14, and knowing where our budget is ending up, I have to say, does that make sense to do that? That 30 cents, it's about $1 million. Every 6 cents, it costs about 6 cents in levy equivalent to fund about $1 million in opt-out. So if I was to take that 30 cents and keep that levy per homeowner flat, I could increase that my opt-out by $5 million. Or another way of saying it, I could at least increase the ceiling on my opt-out. Whether I use it, hopefully we won't need to use it. Hopefully revenue will come in, I'll hit all my efficiency targets, and I won't need to use any more than a $7.5 million opt-out. But if any of those things, the revenue becomes soft, or I can't hit those efficiency targets in the district that are already aggressive, if I want to move my graduation rate, I want to keep the same level of education that I have today, I feel like moving the opt-out, ability to move the opt-out from at least by another $5 million, and moving it maybe from 7.5 to 12.5 or something around that, might be prudent for this board to consider, to give future boards a mechanism to be able to deal with any of those changes that we might see down the road. And so I know we talked about, so that's kind of, as I look at it from a board perspective and having, probably a decade of these budgets behind me, it's one that I haven't seen the 5-year plan, go this low into the fund balance, nor are we going into we saw how devastating it was when we took a backwards move out of Pier, right? But I had a mechanism to increase my opt-out at that time if I so choose, because I have that capacity. Right now, our opt-out is $7.5 million, and I have no capacity to go beyond that. So I think as a board, it may be prudent to be able to create a buffer or a contingency plan to allow me to do that if I need to. And so,
With the tax relief, the mill levy won't increase.
yeah, right now it's forecasted to go down 30 cents per $1,000 if I adopt this budget. So, and it's not to say I would ever use it, but it would to say it may be prudent to consider that as a board, just because of some of the things we're seeing in the district and some of the challenges and some of just the softness and the funding that we've been seeing, and knowing what's to come possibly at a federal level, state level, continued softness in revenue, and those things are concerning, because if the $3 million hit I took this year, getting 0.3 versus 3%, that's every year, right? That's a hole that I have to deal with every year. So over 5 years, that's $15 million I got to cover. It's not just a one-year thing. So that's kind of my view. Something we as a board may want to consider looking into, just to make sure that I said that, again, that we give future boards the capacity to deal with some of these things that may come our way that we can't quantify now, unfortunately, because we usually get them, they just come upon us. Nothing we can predict. We don't have a crystal ball, but I think having an ability to control some of that would be a good thing, I think, for this board to consider.
Any discussion?
Well, I think one of the things we talked about at our work session was reconvening the Finance Action Network. And I think that would be prudent to do that now and take a hard look at this.
Yeah, and for those who aren't aware, the Finance Action Network was basically a group of community finance, CFO type people that would come in and essentially look at our 5-year projection to give us feedback. I think one thing we pride ourselves in this district is transparency. So there's nothing we're not afraid to show anybody from a financial perspective. And I think having those people at the table with us, I think would help us to say, well, they may say it's not $5 million, you should have a $10 million increase or the capacity to do that. I don't know. But I find great comfort probably in having a group of people, high caliber people like that, sit around and work with Business Manager Veek and Superintendent Maher to give us, and the board, a little direction or in are we seeing things correctly, and I think it helps the community too to make sure that we're fully transparent, and it's just the nature of what we're seeing from a funding perspective these days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now is the time for the public hearing on the proposed FY18 budget. If there's anyone in attendance that would like to give testimony or comments or to ask questions, now would be that time. Please just step forward, give us your name and address and your comment or question. Seeing no one, the public hearing has concluded. May I have a motion to acknowledge the public hearing and tentatively approve the FY18 school district budget to allow Human Resources to offer employee contracts with the understanding that the budget will be brought forward for adoption and certification of levies at the annual meeting held July 10th, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We had